Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Health Mastery Show. Today I have on with the Nick Licameli. Nick is the resident physical therapist at 3D Muscle Journey. He's also a pro natural bodybuilder. We had a great conversation today about injuries, so everything to do with injury prevention, how to work around injuries, coming back from injuries, all related to specifically bodybuilding or training in the gym. So a lot of people get injuries where it's just little niggles or where they're pretty severe injuries. So we talk about how to determine whether you should go see somebody or do injuries mean anything. We also talk a little bit about the signs of pain, or at least what Nick knows right now. But if you do have any further questions, please reach out to either of us. But without further ado, let's get into the podcast with Nick Licameli. So Nick, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hey man, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I follow your stuff and I love everything you do, so I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, and it was great to meet you in person. Back in November, you took the journey down from New Jersey. Is that right, or are you from New York?
Yeah, from New Jersey. Took the trip to Worlds. It was awesome. Got to see a lot of people who I only know through social media or through electronic means. So it was really cool to actually meet some people, and I was pleasantly surprised that everyone was just a great, better in person than you could ever expect. And I think that's really what you see in natural bodybuilding. As far as my experience, I feel like there's a lot of really great guys and gals just involved in the sport, and it's nice to see our little community kind of growing.
Yeah. So Nick, you are a natural bodybuilder, and you're also part of 3D Muscle Journey, and that's kind of how we've crossed paths. But give us some insight into where you've got to, or how you've got to where you are today, both from a professional side and also like a personal, or I suppose competitive bodybuilding side as well.
Sure, yeah. So I started out, I guess how most of us start out. We have access to some weights, and we watch Rocky, and we'll play sports in high school, and we pick up some muscle magazines, and it's kind of like a snowball effect. You start in this stuff, and then it just gets you get more and more passionate about it, and so yeah, I started out working out in my garage with my brother. Played football in high school, American football. So always trying to get bigger, get stronger. And then when I left high school, I got into some muscle magazines, and I would read and reread certain magazines and underline and highlight and take notes. And I was just taking in everything like a sponge. Like you couldn't give me enough information. I just wanted to learn more and more about this stuff. And I was trying different things, experimenting with my own self, from different techniques you see in the magazines. And then, I was doing that. And then I realized that I wanted more. I wanted to kind of learn more than what I was just getting from magazines or from like an article online or something like that. So I always gravitated more towards the authors who had some kind of like PhD, or ones that brought science into their content, rather than just like the ripped guy who comes up with a training plan. So I always found myself gravitating more towards the science type people. And then I stumbled upon 3DMJ, and I was following 3DMJ for a while and taking in everything that they put out, and it really did transform my outlook on the sport and my life. Because when you're doing the things that you think are correct, that you hear from magazines or you read online, you implement those things in your life. And for someone who's dedicated and passionate and into this sport of bodybuilding, you'll do whatever it takes, even if it hurts, psychologically, physically. You're gonna do it no matter what. So stumbling across 3DMJ really did change my life, my outlook on the sport. It brought a more evidence-based approach to it, and that's exactly what I was looking for a very long time. And then I started competing in 2013, years before I found 3DMJ. So I went through a couple contest preps, not doing things as I would do now, But I feel like those times, you have to live through those times of making mistakes to really appreciate when you're enlightened and you kind of go about things differently. So I don't regret my contest preps where I was kind of more of a bro than following any kind of structured plan or evidence based approach. And so yeah, I started competing in 2013, earned my pro card in 2016, and then earned another pro card in 2018. But these were all local shows, and I really was not in a great place as far as a competitor goes. I never took an off season. I just grinded. My goal was a pro card, and that led to a lot of unhappiness. It led to a lot of negative feelings toward the sport because I felt like I was always going into these shows trying to get first place or trying to get I was motivated by the placing and the trophy, which is anyone that has been in the sport for any amount of time knows that that's a very toxic way to approach the sport. So I would say I got lucky getting my pro card. I just had the luck of the draw. Certain guys came to the show that day, and on that particular day, I was chosen to be the best. So I got 2 pro cards, but my outlook on the sport now is very, very different than it was then. And so funny enough, that is basically the exact story of my professional career in physical therapy. You go through physical therapy school and you're taught, what you think is what you take as, as fact and as Bible almost. And you take your licensing exam, you pass your exam, and then you go out into the field. And hopefully you have a mentor, and whoever that mentor is, you take whatever they say as gold, and you think that this is the way to do it, this is the right way to do it. But really, it's the same process that I went through bodybuilding. Physical therapy school was fantastic. My school was great. They prepared me perfectly to pass my exam. But usually the research and the content in school is years behind what is cutting edge, because they have to implement it into their curriculum, and what they teach has to reflect what we're going to be tested on in the big exam to get our license. So they can't teach us one thing and then we get tested on something else. So the schools are in an interesting spot where they aren't too up to date on the most recent research. They kind of have to make us pass our exams, and then it's up to us to go about our careers and always seek education and to better ourselves. But so very similar to my journey through bodybuilding, you go through school or you go through the magazines, and then you have a mentor who can be like, the biggest guy in the gym who tells you something, and you listen to it just because they're the biggest guy in the gym or just because they're the physical therapist who's been practicing the longest. And and then you get enlightened. You come across other sources and other individuals in your career, and you kind of you change. You change your ways. And I think the biggest lesson in my 2 stories here is that content will always change, research will always change. But I think the best thing that anyone can do really in life, but in particular bodybuilding and physical therapy, is just have an open mind. Have an open mind and just understand that what you think to be true today can be turned on its head, in a second. So, yeah, I think the best lesson that I've learned throughout my upcoming in bodybuilding and physical therapy is to keep an open mind and avoid speaking in absolutes, and always question where the information is coming from, and always question the information itself. And then as far as 3DMJ, I got involved with 3DMJ. I was writing articles before I had anywhere to put them. So I was in undergrad, college, and grad school, and I was writing different articles and just saving them on my desktop with nowhere for them to go. But I just knew someday I was going to have somewhere to put them, and I was going to be ready when that opportunity came. So I was actually making videos too, my parents' basement, like educational videos, and that never got published, thank God. But I was always kind of doing that that those type of things, for no other reason than I had this information that I just wanted to get out, and I wanted to help others who were maybe in the same situation that I was early on. So I wrote for Tony Gentlecore. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tony. He's a well-known, well-respected strength coach in strength and conditioning, and so Tony put the word out that he was looking for some guest bloggers and guest articles. So I said, what the heck? It's not the first time I've sent in an article somewhere and got rejected, so I'll send some of my work. And then Tony got back to me and said he loved my articles, and he published them, and I wrote for Tony pretty consistently for maybe 2 years or so. And Andrea from 3DMJ was a follower of Tony, and she read some of my content, and at the same time they had been interested in trying to find some sort of physical rehab person, whether it be a physical therapist or a chiropractor or something like that. And so I was put on her radar after she read some of my content from Tony, and then Andrea reached out to me, asked if I'd be interested in writing for 3DMJ, and that was just like a pinch me to make sure I'm not dreaming moment when Andrea Valdez asked me to write for 3DMJ. And then I wrote consistently for 3DMJ, and then they asked if I'd be interested in coming on board as their injury reduction and management specialist. So that was, one of the best opportunities, and I'm so grateful for that. And so I've been doing that for about a year now, and it's been great. I write for 3DMJ. I go on some of their podcasts, and I consult with their athletes online. If there's any kind of injury that the coaches themselves can't seem to work around, they send them my way. And I think the reason for that was because they were, I guess, tired of having their clients go to the local medical professional, whatever that professional may be, and that professional not being too familiar with the needs of a weightlifter or a bodybuilder or anyone who exercises and lifts weights. And the recommendation would usually be stop training, or don't deadlift because it's bad for your back, don't squat because it's bad for your knees. And they just weren't getting the attention that 3DMJ would like. And if anyone knows 3DMJ, you know that they are all about quality and authenticity, and they just want the best for our community. So their idea of bringing me along was to kind of help that and help prevent that cycle of an athlete having some kind of injury and then not really having any support or guidance where to go. So yeah, that's kind of a mouthful, but I think that's about everything. And so working with 3DMJ has been really a great opportunity, and I'm loving every second of it.
That's great, man. And what kind of work do you do on a daily basis if people are online? How do you work with people that are distant between you? Because typically when you think of physical therapists, right, it's very manual therapy or hands-on.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it actually lined up perfectly with, it's funny how opportunities come up at the right times. And if these opportunities came up at other times, you wouldn't seize those opportunities because you're in a different headspace. So the opportunity to consult with people online came about the same time as I started to be more enlightened with recent research in the physical therapy realm. When I first started out in physical therapy, it was very manually driven. A lot of my treatments focused on manual techniques, adjusting this, realigning this, releasing this, stretching this. And then I kind of came to realize that those things aren't really what we should be focusing on. They have their part, but I think what's coming out more and more is that it's more about the progressive strengthening, the progressive exposure to exercise, to different movements. And I'm sure we'll get into what pain is and what pain isn't, in this conversation. But so right as I was getting enlightened with those types of things, this opportunity came up to work with people online, and I was at the same time I was changing my own treatment approach to include more education, more independence, more modifications of exercise and more graded exposure to movements rather than come into the office, let me fix you with my hands, and then you'll be good to go. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, that's pretty much the basis of what I'm doing online. I take a good history, a good subjective interview. I get to know the person as a whole. I don't just focus on the body part. I get to know the person as a whole, their goals, how this pain is impacting their life. Is it preventing them from competing in a bodybuilding show? Is it preventing them from kneeling down and playing with their toddler on the ground? These things are all really, really important. And so it's amazing how much of an impact you can have on someone and their pain experience and their quality of life simply over the internet. And it's been pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, and that tees me up for the first question we have around specifically the topic, and that which I had sent to you before. But what exactly is pain? Because when you think about pain, or when I think about pain, and I'm no expert on it, that it's subjective. From different, one thing hurts one person a different way. The same kind of pressure, or the same injury, or the same heat from like a fire or a furnace or something will affect people different ways. So, if you were to define what pain is, what would you say it is?
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question. I'll do my best, but truth is, it's very it's a growing field, and it's much more complex than we think. We used to think back, in the back in the day, that pain was simply a response to some kind of noxious stimulus. So, if you put your hand on a fire or put your hand near a fire, it's going to give you some amount of pain. If you put your hand closer to that fire, it's going to give you some other amount of pain. And so the more of a noxious stimulus you have, the more pain that you're going to have. And we used to think it was simply, input, output, input, output. But what we're finding is that pain is much more complex than that. And it's more multifactorial than just tissue damage equals pain. There are plenty of examples in the research of people having tissue damage and having no pain. Things like herniated discs or rotator cuff tears or labrum tears in the shoulder and the hip. These types of things can be seen on something like an MRI, but the person never has any kind of pain. But then at the same time, someone who has just like a slight disc bulge or a little bit of a tear somewhere, can have ripping radiculopathy, pain shooting down their leg, and numbness in their foot. So that's just one example, but we're starting to see that tissue damage doesn't always equal the extent of the person's pain perception. Pain can be thought of almost like hunger or thirst. It's just a normal sensation that human beings feel throughout their lives. So sometimes with the goal of decreasing pain, that could be a bit misguided because pain is just something we feel. It's inevitable. We're going to feel it at some point. I think it's how we cope with pain and the strategies we have to kind of live our lives in spite of pain being a reality of our life. And sometimes having the goal of decreasing pain will blind you from all the progress you're making. So, for example, if someone comes in with a 4 out of 10 pain in their knee and they can go up, 3 steps in a staircase and then they have to stop because the pain is too bad, maybe in 4 weeks they still have 4 out of 10 pain, but they can go up 3 flights of stairs instead of 3 steps, right? So they're making improvements, but if they're only focused on the pain, then they're going to miss out on all those, those great gains that they're making. So yeah, we're starting to find out that pain is modulated by the brain and modulated by our past experiences and modulated by the environment we're in. You could think about an extreme example would be you hear those stories of people who sustain injuries, but they go rescue their child from a burning building and don't realize that their arm is broken until hours after the event. Or if a soldier gets injured in battle, they may not realize that they're hurt until after the battle. These are all examples of how tissue damage does not equal pain necessarily. There's a space in between that stimulus and the pain response that's modulated by the brain, and that is where I think we can make the most impact. So the approach that I usually take to pain is for especially someone who's a weightlifter or exerciser, or anyone who kind of has any kind of goal to improve their physique or gain more muscle. Not necessarily a competitive athlete, but anyone who works out, is to find what movements are painful, which ones trigger the pain, and then kind of tease out the root cause of it, right? So tease out what that thing is that is causing your pain. So sometimes it's a range of motion type thing. So if someone has knee pain during a squat, maybe the pain comes on at 90 degrees, right? So right at the bottom of the hole, maybe that's where the pain comes on. Or maybe it's at the top portion of the range of motion. Maybe it's not a range of motion thing. Maybe it's a load thing, right? So maybe we can do sets to 12 or 15 reps, but then when we increase the weight a little bit and we go to reps of like say 6 to 10 or 6 to 8 reps, that's when the pain comes on. So then maybe the trigger is a load thing, right? Then we can modify that. Maybe it's a tempo thing. Maybe it's an intensity thing, like an RPE thing. Maybe training to an 8 RPE feels great, but once you push it closer to failure, maybe that's when you feel the pain. So the idea is to find those things that are triggering the pain and then make an impact there. And the idea is that we want to load the tissue as much as we can without provoking that pain. So if that pain comes on at the bottom of a squat, then we're going to try a box squat, stopping right before that bottom position. So we're still loading that squat. We're still getting under the bar. We're feeling the bar on our backs. We're feeling our feet dig into the floor. We're feeling everything tense up. We're descending into that squat, and we're coming back up. We're still doing most of that squatting pattern without pain. And then what happens is that threshold for pain, as we gradually expose our body to that threshold will increase. And we'll be able to go deeper and deeper and deeper and eventually have no pain. An analogy I like to use is a and it's not mine. It's I've gotten it from a few other people, but it's a pirate or a captain on a ship, and the captain sees lights in the distance, and he can choose his response, right? So the lights that he sees are the stimulus, right? And then his response now is the brain's modulation of that stimulus. So he can either say he maybe just watched a movie about pirates and his uncle was attacked by pirates in those waters before. He sees those lights ahead, and maybe he calls the first mate and he gets everyone ready for battle, and everyone is ready. The cannons are loaded. They're ready to fight for their lives. And then they get closer and closer, and it turns out to be just a lighthouse. So then the way to decrease that response, right, that response like we're getting ready to fight, can be compared to the pain response. The way that we decrease that is by gradually exposing that captain to that light. We want to get him closer and closer and closer to the light so that he realizes that it's just a lighthouse. And it's okay. It's not necessarily pirates every time you see a light. So maybe the first time you push it a little bit closer to the light, maybe you only get half the cannons ready for battle, maybe not the whole ship. And then once you see it's a lighthouse, then you get a little bit closer, and maybe you only get like 1 or 2 cannons ready. And then as you keep doing that, as you keep exposing that captain to that stimulus, that response will get less and less. Almost like if you're afraid of heights or afraid of spiders. You're not going to jump into a tub of tarantulas on day one. You're going to gradually expose yourself to that stimulus. You're going to get uncomfortable. You're going to meet that edge of discomfort, and you're going to take some deep breaths, and you're going to let it sit there. You're going to see how that feels. You're going to see how it feels to be next to maybe 10 feet away from a tarantula. Breathe in, breathe out, and then your body will get used to being 10 feet away from that tarantula. And then you take 2 steps forward, and now you're going to reach that edge of discomfort again. Breathe in, breathe out. reflect, think about how you're feeling. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What feelings are you feeling? Breathe in, breathe out, and then you take some closer steps. And that's basically the process that we go about with pain, is gradually exposing the body to that edge of discomfort while still maintaining a training effect. And sometimes when we have injuries, the recommendation of stopping training completely, that can be quite detrimental, because if you are a consistent avid exerciser and you're in good shape and you're putting up some good numbers in your squats or deadlifts or whatever exercise we're talking about, by stopping it completely and letting the pain kind of subside, yeah, the pain is probably going to stop. But then when you want to go back into training, how do we know where to start, right? We kind of are, it's like throwing darts blindfolded. We don't really know where to start because we haven't squatted, for example, in say 4 weeks. So we put ourselves at risk of overshooting it, which is dangerous, because then we can re-injure ourselves, or we risk undershooting it, and then which is not good either, because then we're not going to get a training effect like we want. So by starting at the top, which is like a full squat, no limitations, and then taking one step down to maybe something like I said, a box squat. If that's still painful, we take one more step down, and then once we find that step where we can load that movement without pain, we load that for a week or so, and then we take one step up, depending on how our body responds. So that is a very stepwise, calculated approach, and we never are confused about where to start after we come back from an injury, because we just took a couple steps back, and now we're going to take those same exact steps forward. So that's one of the things that I think is a big mistake, is when people take time completely off to let something heal, and then we jump back into it and we never really know where to start. So I like that stepwise approach.
Yeah, I got you. So when you're trying to help someone with an injury or work through it, you don't necessarily try and figure out what is always the root cause, but try and work through the movement and increase their threshold for pain. Is that correct? I would guess that I'm under or misinterpreting you there, because that couldn't be the case all the time. But is that an approach you do with kind of manual therapy if you're with people, or with figuring out where the injury is? Like if somebody has a severe injury, you're not obviously just going to get them doing squats, right, until they can bear through the pain, because sometimes that might not be possible. So how do you figure out what the exact injury is, or do you just work through the kind of pain threshold, or try and increase that by working through the movement and loading a movement?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really does depend. What I would say is, if there aren't any red flags, so if there isn't any numbness, tingling, shooting anywhere, if the pain is reproducible, if we're able to, if the pain it fluctuates, if it comes and goes, rather than if there's this dull pain that comes for no rhyme or reason, and it's constant and it wakes me up at night, and I can't reproduce it no matter what I do. For no rhyme or reason, it just always aches. Those are types of things where I would recommend, okay, maybe we should see someone, maybe we should get some imaging, an X-ray, MRI, just to rule out any red flags. But for the most part, I'm not diagnosing at the tissue level, because like we kind of said in the beginning, whether someone has a torn rotator cuff or a bulging disc or something like that, it's not really going to change the course of treatment unless there's some kind of red flag in there.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that most people don't think about, or they misunderstand what physical therapy is supposed to do, or I suppose coming back from an injury or injury treatment. And I'm kind of aware of it, because I told you off there that my dad is a physical therapist, but I don't look into the research at all in injury prevention, or because it's just not really an area that I'm overly interested in. But but yeah, so people think that, okay, I'm injured, so I need to go to the physio so that he can massage me and like put electrodes on me and then like massage the pain or the knots or the adhesions out, and then I'll be better. But from what I've gathered through talking through my dad, and also what you're saying here now, is that the most up to date way to treat injuries, or what the literature has shown, and in your practice as well, is that it's really just about getting people moving through that movement, and trying to just like that pain will eventually just almost go away by itself once you kind of build up a tolerance for it. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's a perfect explanation of it. Yep. The answer is usually get the person moving, get them loading that movement, coming to that edge of discomfort, and really just increasing that threshold. And I think one of the issues in physical therapy is that that is what happens when patients come in with expectations of releasing adhesions or finding a knot or adjusting their hips or realigning their spines. I think when the expectation is that coming in from what patients have seen on TV, what they've read, then the physical therapists are kind of at mercy of what the patient wants. And I think in a model where we get paid to do more things, more treatment gets more money in the system right now, at least in the United States, I think that puts the profession at risk of doing ineffective treatments. But the thing is that they feel good, right? They feel good in the short term. I'm not gonna argue the fact that getting your back cracked doesn't feel good. It feels great. And not gonna lie, that foam rolling makes me feel less tight. But the narrative that goes behind those things is important. It's not that we are aligning someone's spine by cracking their back. What we're doing is almost like Control Alt Delete to the system. We're kind of just giving a short-term relief in some pain and some muscle spasm. And once that good feeling, that hit of dopamine comes, the narrative that follows it can be either crippling or can be allow for some good independence and empowerment. And I think sometimes we fall into the negative aspect of that, almost like a car mechanic who keeps you coming back and keeps taking money from you to fix this and fix that, rather than just say, you know what, as long as you change the oil in this car and maintain it, you'll probably be okay.
I think it's like people don't really think about it, that getting your back aligned, like, is you don't have scoliosis and then you go to the chiropractor and he fixes it. You don't have it, but then like a few weeks you get it again. But just to touch on a topic that you talked about kind of at the beginning, I'm not a personal trainer in person anymore, but I was a couple of years ago, and there was one client who had like a bulging disc, but like something like 20 something years ago, and like every so often he would be like, oh, it's really sore today. But like from what I learned is like that stuff heals pretty quickly, like a broken arm. If you had a broken arm 20 years later, there's something seriously wrong. So it's like just goes back to the point that a lot of it is just kind of almost in your head, And I guess like what you're saying in terms of loading people through injuries, it's probably very practical in the sense of what we're talking about today, in terms of like people training for they're doing bodybuilding or resistance training that have niggles and aches and pains here and there, because it's not like you're going to say, oh, hey Nick, I broke my leg yesterday, and you're like, Adam, load up those plates and squat, motherfucker. You're going to squat, just go slow. I guess it's not like that, right? But when we're doing bodybuilding, and a lot of clients that I work with, and I'm kind of lucky in a sense that I've never really had any huge injuries. Like I broke my finger playing basketball, and the very first time I went to the gym when I was like maybe 14, I just put the pin from the leg extension at the very bottom and did the whole stack and tore my quad, that was stupid. But yeah, so I didn't go back to the gym for a couple of years, and I was just like, you got a free pass, something like that. But yeah, other than that, the only pains I've had is like kind of like overuse pains, or pains that are just associated with perhaps like suboptimal form on certain exercises over time, and after a while they do kind of go away. But with that in mind, is pain always bad, or is it always something that we should kind of be worried about or seek out professional help with, or sometimes is there just like no answer for pain, or at least one that we don't know?
That's a great question, and one that I think is really important. So I think so. Pain isn't necessarily. I don't want to give the impression that I think pain is in your head. It's not that we're making up our pain, or we're like being hypochondriacs and we're like embellishing and we're giving ourselves pain. It's pain is in your head, meaning that like our brain unconsciously modulates pain. Um, so I don't want anyone to misunderstand that I'm saying that, oh, you just have pain because you're afraid to squat, or you're thinking yourself into pain. Um, and that's a great question. What when is pain? What do we do if we have pain? What do we do? Do we always seek out help? Do we just let it push through it? Do we always find ways to modify it? And pain can absolutely be a warning sign. It can be protective. Um, if pain, if you're feeling it, say if it's a sharp pain like during your warm-up sets, that's probably a pain that we don't want to modify and work through. Or if we do, it's going to have to be probably a pretty significant modification, like maybe back to some isometrics, or some lower level exercises, as opposed to changing from a full depth squat to a box squat. Um, like I was kind of saying before, if there's pain that's just constant, can't be reproduced, can't be relieved, that's pain that you probably want to get checked out. If pain is waking you up at night, if you've tried some things that haven't worked, these are numbness and tingling, right? Any kind of severe weakness that just kind of comes on. These are all things that you want to get checked out. Loss of bowel and bladder control. All serious things that are signs that you should probably get something checked out. But then other times pain isn't necessarily an emergency, and then it could be more of just a response to some kind of overload, or some kind of increase in intensity, or increase in volume, or decrease recovery, like sleep or stress, things like that. So really, if you have any question, if it's ever a question in your mind, like I don't know if this is a good pain, or a bad pain, if that even exists, keep those things in mind that I just said. Constant pain that can't be reproduced, can't be alleviated, even in the short term. Numbness, tingling, those type of things, you probably want to get checked out.
Yeah, so I think with like most gym injuries that just kind of progressively come on, rather than say like an acute tear or something like that you notice straight away, and I just from my complete anecdotal observation that they seem to be more common, just like rotator cuff or bicep tendon, or chest pain, or something like that. The things that can be reproduced. Oh, hey Nick, when I press like this, I get pain in my shoulders. Well, what would you initially do in that situation? Is that something to worry about? Would you say, okay, let's stop doing those exercises altogether? Perhaps it's your biomechanics, or is it just that it's overuse? Or what would your initial kind of consultation or questions that you would ask the person, or a person would ask themselves?
Yeah, great question. And so first, I would want to make sure that the person knows that that it doesn't necessarily have to be something structural that is torn, or that is damaged, that needs to be fixed in order to get out of pain. I'd really want to kind of get that in their mind, so that we can have better conversations, moving forward throughout the process. Pain is, like I mentioned before, pain is kind of like hunger, right? Where if you walk by, you could just eat breakfast a half hour ago, and then you walk by your favorite bakery in town, and all of a sudden you're hungry again. It's like, well,
That's only on contest prep.
exactly, only got this prep. You know that hunger is an experience, right? It's a feeling, and doesn't always mean that you're starving to death. It can mean that, definitely, right? If you're stranded somewhere and you haven't eaten in 2 weeks, I'm sure hunger is pretty indicative of tissue damage and starvation. but that bakery after a half hour after eating is not, and it feels the same. The hunger is just hunger, just like pain is just pain. So after we have that conversation, I would then dig into a bit about their history. I would say, well, have you ever felt anything like this in the past? Does the pain come and go? Is it constant? Any numbness, tingling? Okay, get those questions out of the way. Then I'll ask about what happened. Anything else happened in your life around that time when you started feeling the pain? Did you recently try some new exercises? Did you get on a new training split? Did you increase your volume? Did you increase your weight? Did you just break up with your girlfriend? Did you just have a baby? Did you just move? Did you, all these different things that can contribute to pain? I would definitely ask about, and then if I would dive into what causes the pain. At what point of the range of motion do you feel it? Have you noticed if you change your grip, does that modify it? Which exercises can you do? Which ones can't you do? Which ones give you pain? Which ones feel good? And then I'll just collect all this information and then really dive into that person individually. And as you can imagine, all of those answers are going to be different for everybody. So just like an online coach, a bodybuilding coach or a personal trainer, there's no template, right? There's no template. The best in the industry, like you yourself, 3DMJ, we know that each client is an individual, right? And we have to take their entire lives into account. Keto may work good for someone, but other people love their carbs, right? And then that wouldn't be good, or it's very, very individual. So I think that's almost lost a lot in healthcare and fitness, is that there's no easy answer. And sometimes if someone's listening to this and they hear me kind of talk about my approach right now, there's not really a solid answer. It's more of, I would kind of get all this information, come up with some ideas, and we're going to try some things together working as a team, and then we'll move forward, and hopefully through the process you'll be more independent coming out on the other side, so that if anything pops up again, I'm here for you to guide you, answer any questions, but you have these tools, you have this experience to now help yourself and become more resilient moving forward, versus someone who has the 3 exercises to cure low back pain. I mean, that if I didn't know any better, I would click on that every day. That's easier. That's not a long process. That's not me answering a bunch of questions about whether or not I'm stressed or not. Like, I want to do those 3 exercises, and I want to get that machine that vibrates and shakes my muscles and makes me feel better, because that's a lot easier to do. But I think that's where the issue lies in healthcare and fitness. I think a lot of times people are trying to cash in on that mentality, and I think it's hurting the people that we serve. I just heard something, I forget where it was, I think on a TV show. Someone had like a melanoma, some kind of skin cancer on their nose. Oh, it was on the TV show Botched?
Yeah.
So I don't know why it was on, but I was listening to it in the background, and this poor woman like put something, this kind of, I don't know, cream or substance or something, this holistic medication type thing on her melanoma on her nose, and it ended up like eating a hole away in her nose, and this poor woman had to like go through all these surgeries to try to correct this. And I looked over at my wife and I said, this is why I exist. Like, this is why, because this is the most extreme version of the harm that's being done in the medical field and in health and fitness. It's these empty promises. It's these quick fixes. It's these things that make a quick dollar, and it's really infecting the healthcare and fitness industries. And I don't think a lot of people realize how serious that is.
Yeah. And I guess then when we're talking about kind of injury prevention, so we talked a lot about what to do if you do have an injury, but with regards to then injury prevention and specifically warming up in the gym, is that necessary? Is it something that you recommend? Is there certain things that you do or exercise specifically that are more general, just to kind of protect your joints, or to reduce the risk of injury. Is there anything like that? I remember when I first started, or not even first started, but maybe around 5 or 6 years ago, when I was in college, I had a lot of spare time, as you do in college, and I used to do like a warm up that Matt Ogus had on YouTube for like upper body warm up, but it ended up being like 30-40 minutes just for the warm up. And now these days I got like 60 minutes in the gym. Today I think it was like for 45 minutes only there, and really all I do now is if I make sure that my body temperature's up, like I'm not freezing cold, do some light variations of the exercise that I'm gonna actually do. I've used a bit of like a mini red band, some like shoulder kind of rotations and stuff, and then I just get into it. And I don't know, maybe I'm just lucky that I haven't got injured, but that's kind of what I do. What do you recommend for warming up?
Awesome question, man. And what you said is absolutely perfect. I think so. The research on injury prevention, it's one of the big issues with the research on injury prevention is that we really don't have a consistent definition of injury. So is injury anytime someone feels pain? Is injury time off from training? How much time off? Is injury some kind of structural damage, like a torn muscle, even though the person doesn't have pain? So the definition of injury is kind of not exactly concrete, and that kind of makes the research on injury prevention a little shaky. But I think what you said about your warm up is absolutely perfect. And I, just like you, would have a long warm up when I was, in physical therapy school, and I had all this knowledge about every tiny muscle that could be tight and every muscle that could be weak. And my warm up would be probably like 20 minutes to a half hour. I'd be on a foam roller and doing this movement, doing that movement, and then you realize, oh my goodness, like I'm been here for a half hour already. And those type of things like foam rolling or stretching or anything like that, the effect seems to be short term. So if you foam roll, say, your quads, your calves, and your hamstrings, by the time you go to foam roll your hamstrings, the benefit of foam rolling your quads has probably passed, and that window of improved range of motion or decreased quote-unquote tightness has probably passed. So exactly like you said, my ideal warm-up is something to get your heart rate up a bit, and then specific movements to the task at hand. So if you are about to do squats for that day, maybe some, depending on, this is also going to be very specific to each person, but maybe like a goblet squat, right? So take a light weight or dumbbell or kettlebell and just kind of sink down nice and slowly into a goblet squat, sit in the hole for maybe a second or 5 seconds, take a nice deep breath, breathe in, breathe out deep in the hole, and then come back up, squeeze the glutes, feel your feet kind of planting in the floor, get your mindset, close your eyes, get a feel for what's going on. Couple goblet squats, and then get right under the bar and start your warm up sets. And yeah, short, sweet, specific to what the task is at hand. That's the name of the game with the warm up.
Nice. And when it comes to specific gym injuries, is there anything that you notice that cause the majority or the largest percentage of pain within this, let's say, recreational lifters? Is it poor use or poor form, or is that something that you even kind of can see because you come to the table after the fact, right?
Yeah, it's another really good question. Usually, so I'll give the option to clients to send me a video of their technique just to see, because usually if someone comes to me from 3DMJ, they have a decent experience. They're a certain type of athlete who follows 3DMJ that will then reach out for coaching, who will then reach out to me. But if it's someone who isn't a 3DMJ athlete or someone who I may just want to take a look at exercise technique, I'll have them send me a video of some movements in the past that they've done or some movements currently that they're doing. But exercise technique is more of a spectrum as far as a hard good or bad, and that was something that I used to really spend a lot of time on, is trying to get perfect form, right? Trying to get a perfectly neutral spine every time I bent over, trying to keep perfect posture with my shoulders and my back and my head and my neck. One of the jokes about physical therapy school is that you don't know how much you have wrong with you until you go through physical therapy school. And it's funny, but it's also kind of sad, because that's what's happening when these physical therapists come out of school, is that they're looking for problems rather than solutions, right? They're looking for um, everything that's tight, that's weak, that's asymmetrical, everything that's wrong with the person, rather than everything that they can do, everything that's right with the person. So exercise technique I'll take a look at usually a little bit down the road if we can't seem to make an impact with some of the other things that we talked about. Sometimes it's as simple as changing the foot position, or changing the grip on an exercise, or slowing it down a bit, adding a pause. Those types of things are ways that I like to use exercise technique, and also is to change the way that the load and the stimulus is hitting the body. So a lot of times the injuries that I deal with are overuse type injuries. Not that like it's they're a painter or a carpenter and they're hammering or painting all day and their shoulder hurts. Like that's overuse, but overuse in the sense where a certain movement is just getting done repetitively in the same way without enough time to recover. One of the ways to kind of break that cycle is changing up your technique a bit, right? So maybe adding in a heel lift on your squat. You're still barbell back squatting, but that heel lift will now shift the focus more toward your quads than maybe your lower back and your glutes. And maybe that slight change in form and kind of change in the way that the force is going through the body, that may be just enough to allow that overuse cycle to kind of calm down, and then you can revisit your old technique after that. Or it's something as simple as moving your feet on a leg press, right? Or changing your shoulder position on a curl or a tricep press down. All these things can, it's a slight change, and you're still doing the movement, still maintaining that training effect, but it's kind of breaking that overuse cycle. So those are kind of two ways I like looking at exercise technique, is to kind of modify the way the load is getting put through the body, and then kind of a secondary after looking at the other aspects of what can be leading to pain as something to modify.
Yeah, and I guess as bodybuilders or people who just lift a lot, we're kind of anomalies, because the everyday person who gets injuries, they don't. Not everybody lifts all the time, or at least lifts as much as people who are trying to get as big as humanly possible. So, do you think that it's normal, or it's something that you should expect to, I won't say get injured, but have pain here or there from just consistent training over the years? Is that something that we should expect? And then I guess if the answer is yes, then is it just, okay, well, let me just try adjust something here, try perhaps a different exercise first before saying like, oh crap, I got to go see a physiotherapist again?
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things in life. If you're in this for the long game, like you are, and I know your listeners are, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be times when you feel like you could spit fire and nothing could hurt you, and then there's going to be other times when things aren't going so well. Think of it almost like a marriage, right? So, marriage is. I've been married for 4 years now. I've been dating my wife since I was in high school. We've had great times. We've had hard times, and they're to be expected, right? It's not reasonable to think that you're never going to have a disagreement or a hard time or something like that. What's important is how you respond to those times, and getting the tools get through those hard times. So early on in someone's lifting career, or early on in a relationship with someone, and you may get some pain, or you may get into an argument, you don't have those skills to get through that in the beginning, right? You don't have the communication skills with your spouse or significant other in the beginning, to work through a problem, to hear their side of the story, to listen with intent, just to listen, not to make your point. Same thing with training, right? It's, if you have pain, you don't maybe have those tools. You never experienced shoulder pain before, so you don't know what's going on. Maybe you don't know if you tore your rotator cuff, if you're gonna have this pain for the rest of your life. But then as you work through these things, as you realize, well, hey, if a dumbbell overhead press gives me shoulder pain, but a landmine press feels great, or a barbell press feels great, I'm going to use the barbell press, or I'm going to use the landmine press, and let that be my main pressing movement. And then maybe you go back to the dumbbell press after that, and it feels good, right? Or maybe it still hurts, and then you say, okay, well, I don't have to dumbbell press, I could just do this. So you are becoming more resilient after having pain. So you're learning from the hard times, and just like in a marriage, right? You learn through the hard times. I don't learn anything about my wife in the good times. When things are hard, you really have to dig deep. You have to look inside. You have to go to those dark, uncomfortable places and find out more about yourself, and find out more about your spouse. And that's how I think a lifting career should be looked at. You're going to have ups and downs, but it's how you handle those downtimes that makes all the difference, because those downtimes can ruin you, or they can make you stronger. And an argument with a spouse can end the relationship, or it can make it stronger. And that's my goal. My goal is to be that voice, be that person to guide you through those hard times, and show you, like, it's okay. It's okay that you have pain right now. It's okay. We're going to get through this. This is what we're going to do. We're going to try this. We're going to try that. But ultimately, I'm not going to be the one that's getting you better. You're going to be getting yourself better. And then if you ever have any pain in the future, looking back, I got through this, or I got through something like this already. This is what I did. I know that I have more confidence moving forward. I think that's super, super empowering. And that's pretty much my goal. My goal is to be the mentor. I don't want to be the hero, right? I don't want to be the end all be all. I want to just help along the way of someone's fitness journey, and kind of make them more resilient and more confident moving forward.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, man. And then I guess we're almost at time, but final kind of test for you. So I told you a little bit before we began that I kind of have a bit of an injury, so let me see your magic work. I want you to heal me.
No problem. Yeah. So I would say get a foam roller, and maybe some CBD oil. and then put some get some electric stim and ultrasound on there, and you should be good to go, man.
No, but in all seriousness though, I'm genuinely curious. So I started playing basketball again just recently. I played a pretty high level. Well, I played international level, but Ireland is, it's a different kettle of fish, as we say over here, for basketball. It's just not really a big sport. But I hadn't played in years. Since I got into bodybuilding, it just kind of, they don't really go hand in hand. Like trying to get bigger when you're only 5'11", and then playing basketball is just not really conducive. But I started to play again, because I'm not going to be competing for probably at least 2 years, but more than likely more than that, but minimum 2 years. So I just want some competitive outlet. And I've got a court like literally across the road, an indoor court, which isn't that common here. So yeah, started playing, joined up an all team. But after the first 2 weeks, it was going good. Like obviously I wasn't as fit, but got my fitness back. Started to get my shot back, and then got some basketball shoes, like brand new ones, and they look like they got pretty good cushioning. But then all of a sudden, I don't know if it's correlated or it's just coincidence, that my knees, both knees, have like really bad tendonitis. I got really bad pains in my heels. like in my feet, and then all around my ankles and my Achilles are just like super super sore. But only when I like run or jump, and I to the point where I actually can't like sprint. I can only jog because of the pain. So like, what do I do?
Yeah, so that's a really great example, and things like basketball, soccer, sports like that are way more challenging to take the approach that I was talking about before because they're much more random, they're much more uncontrolled, they're much more varying movements than a structured weightlifting plan. But the way you just described your symptoms are really are perfect. So you're having your body is telling you that it was exposed to some kind of
Adam, you're just a fat bastard. You need to lose some weight.
your body's telling you like, hey, look, we're being exposed to something that we're not used to. We're not having enough time to get adjusted. We're not having enough time to get recovered. If you jog, if you squat, it feels good. So it's like, we're good. But when you try to sprint or jump, like that's what we're doing a little bit too much of. Not that it's too much, it's just too much right now. So you took some time off from basketball and then you kind of jump back into it. And then you got the new shoes. And the shoes, not that they're bad, but like we were saying before, adding a little bit of a heel lift to your squat changes the way the forces go through your body. Getting a new pair of shoes does the same thing. So I'm thinking maybe it's just the fact that your body hasn't grown accustomed to that type of training, that type of plyometric, sprinting, jumping type of training. So I think you're right. I think it could be like some kind of short-term inflammation, like a tendonitis or just like a non-specific overuse type injury. So my suggestion would be try to change up the stimulus a bit while maintaining the effect that you want. So if that means maybe holding off on full game speed playing for a couple weeks and just kind of jog around the court but maintain your shot so you can still work on your skills but not provoke that pain, and then kind of gradually expose yourself to it. So maybe you do like you get the ball and you do like a sprint, like a hop to the side, and then you shoot. And hey, that feels pretty good. Okay, so now we're hopping in and shooting, and then maybe you drive to the basket and take a couple steps to the basket. Hey, that feels pretty good. All right, maybe we'll try a couple more of those, and then you gradually kind of work back into it. Yeah. Similar to weightlifting, but pretty much the same process. You're listening to your body. You want it to get accustomed to it. Again, I don't think what you're doing is bad. I don't think you're damaging your tissues. I think you're just giving your body another stimulus that it's not that's too fast. It's coming too fast for your body to adjust to it.
Yeah, I guess it's just like if you start in the gym, right? You do like 30 sets for chest. You're gonna be in another world of pain,
right?
From never. Or I guess I could do wheelchair basketball for a few weeks.
Yeah, you could do wheelchair basketball. But yeah, that's a perfect thing to compare it to is like a newbie at the gym. A lot of times people who have like a surgery, say an ACL repair, they'll be their quad will get very atrophied throughout the rehab process, and they'll ask me, is this ever going to grow back? Like, should I stop training my good side? Is this going to get too big and this is going to stay small? And my answer is, well, the leg that's injured and dealt with the atrophy is now like a new person going into the gym. The other leg is okay. Like that's still pretty much conditioned and that's not going to experience rapid growth, but the side that is atrophied, that's going to respond pretty quickly, compared to the good side. So it's going to grow back a lot faster, and it's not like your good side is going to keep growing and growing. We would all love that, but that's not how it works. So yeah, it's almost like it's just like you're new to the gym or new to any activity. And when I was in PT school, we would play basketball every Friday, and I played sports my whole life, but when I was in grad school, I hadn't played a competitive like impact sport like that in a long time. And I couldn't walk for like 3 days after I played that basketball. But then after a while, like it got better and better. But yeah, the issue was just that it wasn't that basketball was bad. It wasn't that my glutes were weak or that my hip flexors were tight or my hips were unaligned. It was just that this is a new stimulus and my body has to get adjusted to it.
Yeah, I actually experienced exactly the same thing. I squat pretty frequently, and relatively heavy. But I don't run ever because bodybuilders don't run. But when I got back into basketball, I'm kind of lean. I mean, I'm not that lean, but I'm not fat. So I mean, I can still run. But I ran for like an hour or whatever, pick up basketball, and the next day, I swear to God, I felt like I did like 50 sets of hack squats or something like that. But it wasn't that I was like severely heavy load or anything. It's just that stimulus that I wasn't used to. And I guess it's the same for people who play basketball and they never hit the gym. They do like 3 sets of hack squats and then they can't walk for a few days. So it's just
Exactly, yeah, and I get that a lot sometimes when people ask about yoga or Pilates, and I tell them like those things could be great, but you better make sure that you gradually expose yourself to that because I can tell you right now, like my family members and close friends, like they because I'm into bodybuilding and health and fitness, they think that I'm like this super athlete. And I'm like, look, if I ever did a yoga class or a Pilates class, like I wouldn't be able to move for 5 days. Like that's just not what I'm used to. And recently, I don't know what I was doing, but I had to jog or something and I was like, that was the most unathletic thing I've ever done in my life. Like I need to get back into running or something. Because I was like, my 18-year-old self would have watched me do that and would have been disappointed.
yeah. You just have to realize how like unathletic or quote unquote unfunctional bodybuilding actually is. When you try to do other things, you just look muscular or look like you can lift. I got a guy, or look like you can do things. I remember when I was like younger, and I was kind of bigger than everybody because I was into weights. The one guy that I used to play basketball with, because I was doing both simultaneously for a few years, used to say that I had fake muscles because they were just for show.
Yeah, man. No, it's no joke. So my father's a carpenter and he works with my brother. And my dad's like 59 years old, like normal looking guy, like not super muscular, but like, 5'8" maybe and five and just normal looking guy. And there was this piece of furniture in my house and I literally pushed it with everything I had. I wanted to move it a little bit in this room. I put, no joke, like nothing left in the tank. Like tried to move this thing, would not budge. My dad comes over one day and I leave the room and the piece of furniture is moved. I'm like, what did you do? How did you move it? He's like, I don't know. I just pushed it.
Yeah.
I'm like, geez, like, but yeah, it's the principle of specificity, I suppose, right? It's
Yeah,
if you want it.
but I think if you're muscular, if you're big and muscular, it's almost synonymous for everybody else that one, you know everything about health with any regard to like all the way up to like medical doctors and anything that they should do, and also that you want to just fight everybody that wants to fight you as well.
Right. Well, that
Like,
that
you're
part's
big,
true.
you want to fight me.
Yeah. If anyone takes anything out of this podcast, it's that bodybuilders don't run, and we probably want to fight everybody.
Well, Nick, it was great to have you on, man. So where can people find more about you?
Yeah. So I guess 3D muscle journey. So the number 3 letter D musclejourney.com. My Instagram at Nick Licameli. And then my website for my company is strengthtogetheronline.com. Any of those places, feel free to reach out to me. I love, connecting and answering any questions or just, having a little bit of a chat. So feel free to reach out through any of those platforms.
Awesome. Thanks again, Nick.
Hey, Adam, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And thank you for all you do, man. It's really cool. Nice conversation.
All right. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Nick. Injuries is certainly not a topic of forte for me, so I really enjoy chatting to Nick about it. Fortunately, like I mentioned, I haven't really had any injuries that are too severe that have kept me out of the gym or from training for very long periods of time. But it's definitely something important to remember, almost like an insurance policy. You don't really think about injuries until you've got one. But for most people, there's going to be some point where you come up against an injury which is not only going to hold you back physically, but can kind of affect you mentally, depending on how severe that injury is. So if you do have any further questions for myself or for Nick, you can reach both of us through our email addresses or through our websites or social media handles. I'll leave everything in the show notes. And if you want to find out more about Nick, I left all of his handles and all of his social media and websites in the show notes as well. But if you did enjoy the podcast, please do leave a rating and a review, because it helps with all the algorithms, etc. But I will leave you there, and I will chat to you in a further episode when we have on more great guests, much like Nick Licameli. Thanks a lot.